An area that's fraught with false accusations of sexual abuse or sexual misconduct is an area of the aftermath of person's relationships. When a relationship ends, it's a very tense and very messy time for all of the parties. Sometimes there is infidelity for one or both of the partners, and so we have a lot of accusations of misconduct in terms of domestic violence, in terms of sexual misconduct, and oftentimes misconduct towards the children, whether it's child endangerment or child abuse. There's also issues of division of property too, and sometimes there are issues of significant financial interest at stake, so people can lie.
Absolutely. I mean, emotions are really high. I mean, in these types of cases, we see all kinds of accusations flying that come out. And one where we see the greatest amount of accusations, and we'll talk about that first, is child custody. Isn't that where we see the most?
Yeah, I agree with you, Roland. I think that nowadays a well-educated person who has access to the internet can very easily figure out that the nuclear option they have available in terms of winning whatever they want in court, at least for a substantial period of time, is to make an allegation that the other person has done something inappropriate sexually, either to themselves or, more importantly, to the child. There's a very problematic presumption in family law cases in favor of the person who's a victim being awarded child custody. So what that means is that if one spouse alleges that they're a victim at the hands of the other spouse, or their child is a victim at the hands of the other spouse, the spouse that's victimized gets the custody of the children. And that's going to be awarded virtually every time in family court. So this results in protective orders being issued, the other parent being entirely removed from the child's life, and this is going to make it much easier to then manipulate that child, brainwash that child, and influence their potential testimony, not only in family court, but more likely in a criminal case where someone like you and I are going to encounter this.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. And these accusations, quite often, they ultimately turn out to be false. However, while you're going through it, it's really hurtful to the family, to the kids, to everyone involved. As we talked about previously, any accusation is almost impossible to disprove just by saying, I didn't do it. And most of these accusations, there's no proof other than a statement that this happened. It's devastating to the entire family. But one party gets what they want. They get custody. They get money. They get something out of it. So, William, when people are breaking up, how can somebody protect themselves against these false accusations?
Well, it's very difficult, Roland. And I think rule number one is probably to check your emotions at the door. It's very important, again, to be a decent human being, to put the interest of your family and other people first, and to make sure that you act above and beyond reproach, that you take the higher road wherever possible. I mean, obviously, consult with your family law attorney, protect your legal interests, but you don't have to be a jerk or you don't have to be petty or vindictive while you're doing this. You don't need to be unnecessarily hurtful. Most importantly, you need to be very careful. And what you do to protect yourself the most is to document with specificity, with particularity, any past accusations that were false, any past threats to accuse you falsely. We've had that quite a lot. Any past dishonesty outside of infidelity. Infidelity by itself may not be enough because it's not unlawful anymore to cheat on your spouse. But anything that shows that the other person is a liar, that the other person has motive to lie, that they're hurt, that they're vindictive, and that they're out to get you. And particularly important, if that person has ever threatened to get you in trouble, if you leave them, you got to document that. You got to document that they're capable of doing this to you. You have to preserve it, and you have to share it with your attorneys as early as you can.
So, William, should a person give up custody, potentially, or give up something in the short term for peace to avoid the risk of having a false accusation in a really heated situation?
You know, it's a tough question, Roland. I think that depends on individual situation, and those are decisions that a person would need to make after consulting with their lawyer. I don't know that I would necessarily advise somebody to stop seeing their child. That seems to be extreme. But I certainly think that in a heated situation, perhaps a more conciliatory gesture that has to do with a minor accommodation, maybe something that has to do with finances, something that has to do with property, something that maybe has to do, we see that quite a bit, shared responsibilities around child pickup or child drop-off, things that cost less to give up than not seeing your child. I certainly think that if you can avoid going down this road by giving up something minor in order to gain peace, in order to gain something far greater, I think that should be considered on a personal level and not necessarily solely on a legal basis or a legal level.
Now, William, when people break up, it's not just child custody where we see issues. A lot of times we see, and quite often pops up, is when all of a sudden you have a new girlfriend or a new boyfriend. And then we see accusations start coming out of the woodwork as well. Doesn't it happen a lot? Haven't we seen just like a ton of cases like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have a case of potentially some infidelity or bubbling divorce, and then one person has moved on, but the other person has refused to accept it. I mean, human nature is such that it happens all the time. And so the first person starts showing off their new girlfriend online, happy photos of the new couple holding hands, having a grand time, sipping cocktails together. And all of a sudden, your former partner decides, oh, you know what? I'm going to exercise the nuclear option. And now they're saying, well, during our marriage, he would repeatedly get me intoxicated and then proceed to sexually assault me. Or that person might say, during our marriage, he would do all of these other things to me sexually that were never reported, that there is no evidence for whatsoever. Or perhaps there may have been evidence of some consensual acts in the past. Maybe this couple was into some kink experiences together. Maybe they took or recorded videos together or took photos, and maybe that left some marks or bruises. And all of a sudden, this gets manipulated. It gets misused, and it gets misreported inappropriately in order to get the person in trouble. So when relationships come to an end, if you know that something like that exists in your past history with this person, if you know that maybe you had consensual rough sex with your partner some time ago and she sent you a picture of a mark you left on her, maybe you got to be very careful. Maybe you got to use good judgment and sometimes take a higher road. Maybe make some concessions. Be mindful of how your behavior with the new girlfriend or the new boyfriend could affect your family, because you're vulnerable to false accusation of sexual misconduct at this time.
Yeah, and some of the things that I've seen come about in that area is when exes start communicating with each other, it's never a good idea. It never seems to end well, does it, William? It never ends well.
Yeah, I find it really remarkable, Roland, that there are now these internet groups, for women, and I suppose for men as well, where they can get information about the person they were in a relationship with. They can exchange hints or tips or talk about things they learned about a person. And so in a post-breakup scenario, that creates a fruitful ground for people to essentially get their stories together, to obtain information that's embarrassing and sometimes could lead to somebody being framed for a crime they didn't commit,
Yeah. And in addition, sometimes when we see these types of communications, it devolves between the exes where we see social media posts and people are threatening each other and a lot of things happen. So to me, the best advice is to stay out of social media. Don't engage. Lay low until the dust settles. The best way to stay out of trouble that way is if somebody wants to start and spread rumors about you, you don't need to engage. Once again, take the high road. Ignore it. Don't have your new girlfriend, your new wife, your new boyfriend respond. That's never a good idea.
Rarely a good idea. I agree with that. And again, you just have to be sensitive to the fact that if you have moved on, but your former partner has not, if you left your family with children and you started a new relationship, maybe it's not the best thing to do to go online and rub your new relationship in everybody's face. Maybe use some discretion. Maybe use some good judgment. I mean, it's not unlawful to do that, but it's bad practice, it's poor tone, and it certainly could result in somebody getting really upset at you and saying things falsely once they think that this relationship is permanently over, that you never quite believed they were capable of saying about you. And unfortunately, we do see that. We see that in our practice.
Yes, we see it all the time.